It began with silence. Not the peaceful kind, the wrong kind. The kind that presses against your eardrums and makes you realize something fundamental is missing from the world around you. The Morrison family noticed it first. Their farmhouse sat at the edge of a dense pine forest in rural Vermont, miles from the nearest town. For 3 days, the forest made no sound. No birds, no insects, no wind through the branches. Just a suffocating stillness that made even breathing feel too loud. Sarah Morrison, the mother, told her husband David it felt like the woods were waiting for something. He laughed it off. Their 2 children, Maya age 9 and Michael, age 6, complained they couldn't sleep. They said the silence was too heavy. Sarah dismissed it as imagination until the 4th night, when the knocking started. 3 soft taps on the kitchen wall. A pause. 3 more. Then silence. David checked outside with a flashlight. Nothing. No animals. No loose boards. No explanation. But when he walked the perimeter of the house, he found them small footprints in the frost. Bare feet, child-sized, leading from the tree line directly to the wall where the knocking had come from. Then they just ... stopped, as if whoever made them had simply vanished. The footprints appeared every night after that, always the same path, always ending at the wall. And every night at exactly 12:03 a.m., the knocking returned. By the 5th night, Sarah was sleeping in the living room with the children. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was studying them, learning their patterns. The knocking had grown louder, migrating from room to room, as if following them. That night, it stopped at the children's bedroom door. Then came the voice, soft, childlike, speaking in a slow, broken melody that sounded almost like humming. But the tune was wrong, played backward, distorted, like a music box winding down. Sarah pressed her ear against the door, trying to understand the words. Then she realized it wasn't words, it was mimicry. The voice was copying the sounds of speech without understanding what speech meant. At 12:15 a.m., someone knocked on the front door. Just once. Polite, patient. David looked through the peephole and his blood turned cold. A small figure stood on the porch, a girl, maybe 10 years old, wearing an old-fashioned dress that looked decades out of place. She was perfectly still. No breath misting in the cold air. No fidgeting. No signs of life beyond the shape itself. When David blinked, her head tilted slowly to an unnatural angle, as if she sensed him watching. Then she spoke, her voice muffled through the door, but somehow crystal clear, as if whispering directly into his mind. "Please, let us in. Us. Not me. Us." David stumbled backward, heart hammering. Sarah rushed to the window and pulled the curtain back a fraction. 3 more children stood in a perfect line at the edge of the porch, all wearing the same outdated clothes, all staring at the house with the same impossible stillness. And when the moonlight hit their faces, Sarah saw what made her drop the curtain immediately. Their eyes were completely black, no whites, no pupils, just endless, bottomless voids where eyes should be. By morning, the children were gone. But the house felt different, colder. The air had a metallic temps, like old iron. And when Sarah checked the walls where the knocking had come from, she found something that made her call David immediately. Tiny black handprints, dozens of them, not on the outside of the walls and the inside, as if something had been crawling through the spaces between the wood and plaster. David called the police. 2 officers arrived, skeptical and bored, expecting a prank. But when they inspected the footprints, still visible in the frost, their attitudes changed. The prints were too deep, pressed into the frozen ground with a weight that shouldn't belong to children. And they were warm. Steam rose faintly from each impression, as if whatever had stood there generated heat from within. The officers left quickly, promising to file a report. David knew they wouldn't. That night, the knocking came from every wall simultaneously. A dozen small fists tapping in perfect synchronization, moving around the house like a swarm. The humming returned, multiple voices now, layered and discordant, vibrating through the floorboards. Emma and Michael were crying, covering their ears. Sarah held them tight, whispering that it would be okay, but she didn't believe it. David grabbed his flashlight and shone it through the window toward the tree line. What he saw made his stomach drop. Dozens of small figures stood just beyond the forest edge, packed shoulder to shoulder, faces pale in the beam. Their eyes absorbed the light, reflecting nothing. And when the beam swept across them, their heads turned in eerie unison, not toward the light, but toward David holding it. They knew who he was. At 1 a.m., the lights flickered and died. The house plunged into darkness. Michael pointed down the hallway, his voice barely a whisper. "Mummy, ... Someone's inside." Sarah turned slowly. At the far end of the hall stood a small silhouette, faint but undeniably real. When lightning flashed outside, illuminating the figure for a split second, Sarah saw its face. A boy, no older than 7, smiling, eyes completely black, and he was standing inside their home. David didn't think. He grabbed the children and ran for the front door, Sarah right behind him. They burst into the yard, gasping for air, and froze. The forest was alive with movement, not running, not walking, just appearing. Dozens of children materialized between the trees as if stepping through invisible curtains, some too tall, some too thin. Their limbs hung at wrong angles, their heads tilted too far. They weren't chasing, they were surrounding, waiting. The family scrambled into their car, locking the doors. But even inside, they weren't safe. Small hands pressed against the windows, leaving fogged prints that stayed long after the figures retreated into the darkness. Sarah was sobbing. Emma and Michael were silent, staring at the shapes moving in the shadows. David's hands shook so badly he could barely turn the key. They drove to Sarah's sister's house 3 towns over and refused to return home. For 2 days they tried to convince themselves it was over, that they'd escaped. Then Sarah's phone rang at 12:03 a.m. No caller ID, just static. And beneath the static, faint and distant children humming. David hired movers to empty the house. He refused to go back, refused to even drive past the property. But the movers called him after the first day, voices shaken. They'd found handprints, not just on walls, on the ceiling, inside closets, on the underside of furniture. Every print was pitch black, as if burned into the surface. One mover swore he saw a child watching him from the attic window, but when they checked, no one was there, just more handprints. And in the center of the attic floor, written in dust, "We are cold." The house was boarded up and abandoned, but the sightings didn't stop. Travelers on the nearby highway began reporting children standing on the roadside at night, waving as if stranded. Those who stopped described the same chilling detail. The children would approach the car and ask, in monotone voices, "Can we come with you?" Their faces never moved, their eyes never blinked. And if the driver hesitated too long, the children would lean toward the window, their movements too smooth, too fluid, as if gliding without moving their legs. One couple made the mistake of unlocking their door. The child who'd been standing outside moved forward without stepping, sliding into the car like smoke. The couple screamed and sped away before it could fully enter. But for miles, they saw it in the rear-view mirror, running fast, impossibly fast, keeping pace with the car at 60 miles per hour, its face expressionless, its black eyes locked on them. 3 weeks after the Morrison family fled, Sarah's sister called, frantic. Emma had stopped speaking. She'd sit in her room for hours, staring at the wall, humming that same backward melody. When asked what was wrong, she'd only whisper, "They're still looking for us." Michael started sleepwalking. Sarah would find him standing at windows in the middle of the night, his face pressed against the glass, breath fogging the pane. When she asked what he was doing, he'd turn slowly, eyes unfocused, and say, "They want to come in. They're so cold." David installed new locks, security cameras, motion lights, but every morning, the footage showed the same thing. At exactly 12:03 a.m., the cameras would cut to static, and when they came back online minutes later, there'd be a new handprint on a window, a new set of footprints in the yard, always closer to the house than before. Sarah began hearing knocks on the walls of her sister's house, soft, rhythmic, 3 taps, a pause, 3 more. Her sister swore she heard nothing, but Sarah knew. They'd followed. One night, David woke to find Sarah standing at the bedroom window, staring into the dark. He called her name. She didn't respond. He touched her shoulder, and she turned her eyes wide, her face pale, her voice barely a whisper. "They're here. They've been here every night. They just want to come inside." "Sarah, stop, they're so cold." "David, we should let them in." David pulled her away from the window. Her skin was ice cold. Her pupils were dilated, unfocused. It was as if she'd been ... compromised, infected by something that whispered through the glass during those silent hours after midnight. The next morning, Sarah seemed normal. She claimed not to remember standing at the window, but David noticed she kept glancing toward the doors, as if expecting someone. That night, at 12:03 a.m., David woke to the sound of a lock clicking open. He bolted upright. Sarah's side of the bed was empty. He ran downstairs and froze. Sarah stood at the front door, her hand on the knob. The door was open, and in the doorway stood 3 children, their faces pale, their eyes black, their smiles too wide. They stepped forward in unison, their movements synchronized, unnatural. Sarah, no, but she was already stepping aside, her voice hollow and distant. They're so cold. They just need to come in. David lunged forward, slamming the door shut and locking it. He grabbed Sarah, shaking her, screaming her name. Her eyes were blank, empty. When she finally blinked, she looked at him with confusion and terror. David, what's happening to me? They left that night, didn't pack, didn't tell anyone, just drove. They drove until sunrise, then kept driving. David didn't know where they were going, just away. Away from the house, away from the woods, away from the children who shouldn't exist. But 2 nights later, in a motel 3 states over, David woke to knocking. 3 soft taps on the door, a pause, 3 more. He looked at Sarah, her face pale in the darkness. Emma and Michael were awake, sitting up in their beds, staring at the door. David approached the peephole slowly. His hand trembled. He looked through and saw a small girl standing in the hallway, old-fashioned dress, black eyes, tilted head. She smiled. Then she spoke, her voice somehow passing through the door, through the walls, directly into his mind. "You can't run. We're already inside." David stepped back, his heart pounded. He turned toward his family and froze. Sarah's eyes were black, completely black. She smiled at him, her voice soft and wrong. "Let them in, David. We're so cold." Emma and Michael stood beside her, holding hands, their eyes the same endless voids. They spoke in unison, their voices overlapping, distorted. "Let us in, let us in, let us in." David stumbled backward, crashing into the door. He fumbled for the handle, threw it open, and ran into the hallway, down the stairs, out into the parking lot. He didn't look back, couldn't look back. Behind him, he heard footsteps, dozens of them, light and fast, growing closer. He reached his car, started the engine, and sped onto the highway. In his rearview mirror, he saw them, not just his family, dozens of children pouring out of the motel, standing in perfect rows, watching him leave. David Morrison was found 3 days later by a state trooper, parked on the side of a rural road. The car was running, the doors were locked, and David was sitting in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead, unresponsive. When the trooper finally broke the window, David turned slowly. His eyes were normal, but he wouldn't speak, wouldn't move, just kept whispering the same thing over and over. "They're inside now. They're inside all of us." Double quotes. Sarah, Emma, and Michael Morrison were never found. The motel staff reported that the family checked out normally the morning after David fled. Surveillance footage showed them leaving together, walking in perfect synchronization toward the parking lot. But their car was still there, and no one saw where they went after stepping out of frame. 3 months later, a family renting the Morrison farmhouse reported hearing knocking at night. 3 taps, a pause, 3 more. And when they looked outside, they saw 4 figures standing at the tree line, a woman and 2 children, and a man who looked exactly like David Morrison. They were all smiling, and their eyes were completely black. The family moved out the next day. The house remains abandoned, but travelers still report seeing lights inside at night, shadows moving past windows. And if you drive by at exactly 12:03 a.m., you might hear a soft knock from somewhere deep in the woods. 3 taps, a pause, 3 more. And if you listen closely, you'll hear the voices of children, speaking in perfect unison, carried on the wind. "Please, let us in." Based on reports of black-eyed children encounters across rural America and the mysterious disappearance of the Morrison family in 2019.